Migrants pour into New York. Why? Is this to avoid Trump-era deportation? As migrant numbers surge in New York, questions and speculation about the reasons behind this influx are dominating headlines and public discourse. Are migrants flocking to New York to avoid deportation under policies reminiscent of the Trump administration, or are other factors at play? Understanding the complex dynamics of migration and policy shifts in the U.S. sheds light on the motivations of those arriving in record numbers and reveals a story far more nuanced than politics alone. The New York surge, a bird's-eye view. New York City, long a symbol of America's open-door promise, has seen a surge of migrants in recent months, sparking debate and logistical challenges for local officials and residents. For a city that prides itself on diversity and tolerance, the sheer volume of new arrivals has ignited a new debate. What's driving the surge, and can New York cope with the rising demand for housing, social services, and employment opportunities? Before diving into motivations, it's essential to understand the numbers. Since early 2023, tens of thousands of migrants have arrived in New York City alone, filling emergency shelters and even being housed in converted hotels and other temporary accommodations. City officials say the system is strained to its limits, a scenario echoed by nonprofit organizations working on the ground. So why are migrants choosing New York over other cities? Policy shifts. What's changed since Trump? The U.S. immigration landscape has undergone a whirlwind of changes over the past several years. During the Trump administration, immigration policies tightened dramatically, with a focus on deterrence and deportation. Policies like the Remain in Mexico initiative, stricter asylum restrictions, and increased ICE activity created a climate of fear and uncertainty for migrants. For many, the Trump era marked a period where the risks of attempting to enter the U.S. became dauntingly high. However, when the Biden administration came to power, it quickly set about reversing many of these measures. Family separations were halted, the Remain in Mexico policy was largely rolled back, and a more empathetic approach was emphasized. This change, coupled with a marked increase in asylum seeker rights, allowed many who had been waiting at the southern border to finally enter the U.S.
While some critics argue that Biden's policies could lead to a perception of more open borders, in reality, many systemic barriers to legal immigration still remain. The journey is still perilous, and many migrants face deportation or deportation hearings even after they arrive in the U.S. But in a marked contrast to the previous administration, there is a clear reduction in policies specifically intended to deter or turn away migrants at the border. For some migrants, this shift has created an opportunity but not necessarily a guarantee of entry and security in the U.S., at least compared to the environment under Trump. New York, seen as a sanctuary city with a reputation for supporting immigrant communities, has become a top destination sanctuary city factor. What it means for migrants. New York is known for being a sanctuary city, a place where local law enforcement does not typically cooperate with federal immigration authorities on deportation matters. Sanctuary policies provide a layer of protection for undocumented immigrants, as local police don't inquire about immigration status during routine interactions, making New York appear safer for those living in the U.S. without legal permission. While sanctuary policies don't equate to immunity from deportation, federal ICE agents can still operate within the city. The absence of local collaboration with ICE can make everyday life feel less risky for immigrants. For those fleeing political or gang violence in Central and South America, or escaping poverty in other parts of the world, New York's perceived leniency offers a glimmer of hope. But this hope comes with an asterisk. The U.S. immigration system remains notoriously backlogged, and asylum seekers often wait years before having their cases heard. This, coupled with the high cost of living in New York, creates a mixed bag of risks and opportunities for migrants arriving in the city. Economic motivations and global challenges. Beyond politics, while political shifts and sanctuary policies play a role in motivating migration, they are far from the only factors. The global economic landscape is a key driver, with economic instability pushing more people from Central and South America, Africa, and beyond to seek stability and opportunity in the United States. Over the past decade, countries like Venezuela, Honduras, and Haiti have faced economic crises that have decimated opportunities for millions. Political corruption, economic mismanagement, and in some cases outright violence create a perfect storm that drives people from their homelands in search of safer ground. For many, the U.S. with its promises of freedom and economic opportunity remains a beacon, even though the journey itself often carries high risks and uncertain outcomes. Climate change is another major force fueling migration, as droughts, hurricanes, and other extreme weather events become more common, particularly in Central America. Climate-related migration is on the rise, and it's affecting the patterns and demographics of people arriving at the U.S. border. Families facing climate disasters often leave home because they feel they have no other choice, and once in the U.S., New York's established immigrant communities, coupled with sanctuary policies, make it a natural destination. Challenges facing New York. Strain on resources and public response to the influx of migrants has placed enormous pressure on New York's already stretched resources. Shelters are reaching capacity, and public services from healthcare to education are struggling to meet the needs of new arrivals. While the city has a history of providing refuge to those in need, the surge has reached levels that city officials admit are difficult to sustain. Mayor Eric Adams has been vocal about the challenges, stating that the city simply doesn't have the capacity to handle such a large influx indefinitely. Housing, in particular, has become a flashpoint, with some migrants placed in hotels and temporary shelters that were never intended for long-term residency. The strain is not only on physical resources but also on the city's social fabric, with some New Yorkers expressing frustration over how resources are allocated. While most New Yorkers continue to support immigrant rights, there is also concern over how the city will balance the needs of long-term residents with immediate needs of new arrivals. This challenge highlights an ongoing tension between the city's legacy as a welcoming hub for immigrants and its very real logistical limitations. Federal versus local responses. An uncertain path forward. One of the biggest challenges in managing this migration surge is the disconnect between federal immigration policies and local capacities. The federal government sets immigration laws and procedures, but it's often cities like New York that feel the impact of those policies firsthand. Without adequate federal support, local governments are left scrambling to provide housing, food, and other services to migrants. Mayor Adams and other city officials have called for more federal assistance, arguing that cities should not have to bear the entire burden of managing large-scale migration on their own. They advocate for more funding and resources from the federal government to help offset the costs, as well as policy changes that might better distribute new arrivals across the country. But federal support has been slow to materialize, and some critics argue that the Biden administration needs a more comprehensive strategy to manage immigration effectively. As long as these disconnects exist, the pressure on cities like New York is unlikely to ease anytime soon.
The role of cartels and smugglers exploiting uncertainty complexities of migration are not lost on those who seek to profit from it. Cartels and human smugglers have capitalized on shifting immigration policies, often spreading misinformation to lure migrants into making the journey north. Some smugglers have promoted the idea that migrants have a narrow window of opportunity to enter the U.S. without facing deportation, a notion that likely taps into the perceived leniency under the current administration. For some migrants, especially those fleeing dire circumstances, misinformation from smugglers can fuel unrealistic expectations and heighten the urgency to reach the U.S. border. In this way, cartels and smugglers not only exploit migrants but also contribute to the pressures on cities like New York, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of migration that is difficult to control. What's next? The future of immigration in New York and beyond. New York's experience with migration reflects broader trends that affect cities across the United States. While political shifts have created new opportunities for migrants, economic instability, climate change, and organized crime are all compounding factors driving migration that won't disappear with the Chang-Ian administration. As the debate over immigration continues, it's clear that a one-size-fits-all approach won't work. Comprehensive immigration reform, more robust support for sanctuary cities, and sustainable solutions to address the root causes of migration are essential. New York's resilience in welcoming migrants has been tested before, but the current surge highlights the need for updated policies and better federal-local coordination to address these realities. Whether migrants are fleeing Trump-era deportation policies or simply seeking a better life, the challenges they face and the challenges cities face in welcoming them are deeply interconnected. The path forward requires a balanced approach that respects both humanitarian values and practical capacities, ensuring that cities like New York can remain a safe harbor without compromising their own stability. Go ahead to visit our channel and stay informed with the stories that matter. For more captivating insights into the issues shaping our world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Join our community and never miss a beat.